My friends, for those of you new to the conspiratorium, there is always a recurring question that has come up. And that is, in this case, could Charlie Kirk be alive today? Right now? Could that event, whatever you saw, have been not what you think? Could he have been swept off, fixed up, and sent somewhere where he is alive and well as we speak? And the reason why I ask it is that I've been seeing so many people online in various platforms say this. And sometimes people say it almost because they want it to be true, as opposed to they know it to be true. But the question is, let's talk about this. And while we're at it, this is a recurring theme. They said a couple of years ago that John Kennedy Jr. was alive, or maybe Osama bin Laden's alive. I've got less of a question there, but we never saw death pictures. Not to mention all these people claimed they shot him, and some people who did, maybe didn't. Saddam Hussein. Any pictures of him? Any death photos? No, we had pictures of his kids, Uday and Qusay, but nothing from Saddam. He's dead, right? And what about Epstein? Remember, people looked at the auricles or the pinna, that elastic little cartilaginous folds of the ear, when he was removed from his death cell. People said, look, they're doing the same thing with Joe Biden. They're looking at the ear folds, the auricles, the pinna of it, and people are saying this. And of course, you're dismissed as you're a nut. You're crazy. This can't be. You can't hide somebody. No, it's never happened, right? It's never happened, right? You can't do this. You can't. My God, with our dogged media, they would get to the bottom of this. They don't cover anything up. Our media, can you imagine CNN? Well, they'd be all over this. But here's what I want you to think about. I want you to change a little bit about the way you think and look at it this way. Imagine for a moment that the greatest trick modern power or power centers ever pulled was not convincing people of a lie, but convincing them that certain possibilities are so outrageous, so out of the question, that they're not even worth examining. In a future that is shaped by advanced biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and masks that we have seen, and that the CIA has alluded to, masks that are just incredible in terms of how realistic they are, and worlds, I guess, Intel and others with total information control, the line between life and death and identity could become far more, dare I say, flexible than we ever assumed. And this is not an accusation about any real individual. It's a science fiction thought, right? It's a science fiction thought. It's a thought experiment. Yeah, that's it. Just a thought experiment about how easily our assumptions could be manipulated. Remember the line I always give you, what Marshall McLuhan said, that little lies are hard to keep secret, but big lies are easy because of our incredulity. When something is so outrageous, alive? What? That's the cover. That can't be right. No. There can't be aliens walking around here. No. That's the thing. It is shielded by our own inability to appreciate the possibility that it even exists. Now, we already live in an age, as you know, where faces can be digitally altered in real time. I mean, if you think AI doesn't only exist in computers. You know, voices can be cloned. Entire video performances can be synthesized from fragments of data. And now, project that technology. Just project it a little forward, maybe several decades. Or maybe now. Maybe this was available then. Add surgical techniques that can restructure bone, that can alter skin texture, reshape biometric markers, add genetic therapies that can subtly change hair patterns and aging processes, physical traits. None of this requires magic. It requires only incremental progress along paths that are already visible. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, my friend, in such a world, It would be technically possible for a public figure, presumed dead, to be given an entirely new appearance and identity. And the mechanics would not even be the hardest part. The harder part would be narrative management. Who controls the story? Who dissuades and redirects attention? Human beings rely on shared stories to anchor their sense of reality. When a major figure is declared dead, the public processes that event through, ritual and media repetition and what they attempt to be some kind of emotional closure. That's what they try to do. That's what the attempt is. That's what they hope happens. Once that closure sets in, most people stop questioning it. And the mind prefers the stability over endless doubt. That's what it wants. This is where incredulity plays a role. This is where it really kicks in. This is where this ability for us to say, I don't know about that, especially as to the possibility of it happening in the first place. This is where incredulity becomes a form of security. And that's critical. Your reaction provides the cushion against this. If someone were to suggest that a well-known leader or actor or somebody was secretly alive and living under another identity, the guaranteed immediate reaction would be laughter, hilarity. Not only that, accusations that you're crazy. You're wait for it, a conspiracy theory, right? They'd be laughing because not because the logistics are impossible, but because the claim that you're saying violates social expectations. We are trained to treat official narratives as the baseline of reality. Whatever they say goes. And for you or anyone to challenge them requires extraordinary evidence, right? Extraordinary evidence. And most people don't have the time, the inclination, or the incentive, or the ability, or the functionality to even pursue that. So, think about this. Is it impossible? Is it? Consider how intelligence agencies already operate in fiction and in documented history. This is one of the greatest examples there is regarding this. It works something like this. Witness protection programs relocate individuals with new names and backgrounds all the time. Deep cover operatives live for years under constructed identities supported by elaborate paperwork and digital footprints. In a future with more sophisticated data and data systems, those identities could be even more seamless. The placement will be more perfect. A person could step into a fully formed life with employment history, social connections, and financial records that appear authentic from every angle. The only question would be, how do you take somebody who, let's say, was Epstein, who lived in this grandeur, and he turns up in Casper, Wyoming, working the late shift at a Circle K? You know what I mean? That's a bit extreme. The acclamation is the part of it. That's the difference. Now imagine layering that capability onto a scenario involving a high-profile figure. How would that go? The transformation would not need to be perfect. It would only need to be good enough to pass casual scrutiny. Most social interactions are superficial anyway. We recognize people by, general patterns rather than forensic detail. We don't look at their biometrics. And a change in posture or hairstyle or facial structure combined with a new context would be absolutely sufficient to prevent recognition, especially if the surrounding culture has already accepted a narrative of death. Once everybody agrees he's dead, he's gone, that's it. So if you were told Charlie Kirk is dead, that's it. That's why it's also helpful that we see there's no burial, there's no funeral, there's no morgue pictures, there's no Emmys report, there's no nothing. There was a picture of a hand. Okay. Which, by the way, was the tackiest thing, I think, ever exemplified in the modern realm, if that's even possible. And there's a lot of tacky out there to go around. Now, let's look further. Media dynamics would also play a very critical and decisive role in this speculative scenario. See, news organizations operate within systems of access and authority. If official channels present a consistent story, the official narrative, and there is no definitive proof to the contrary, the incentive on their part to aggressively debunk fringe speculation is limited. Editors weigh credibility with audience interest and institutional relationships. Do I have the okay for this? Does anyone care for this? Does anyone care? Look at some of the stories. Why don't you think UFOs are covered more? Why not the paranormal? Why not ghosts and spirits? And either they figure through their own sampling that this is not something people care about, or maybe they're told, don't go there. But it's fascinating. That's why these particular platforms are going to change the way. And in a tightly managed information environment, the absence of confirmation can function almost as a silent boundary, if that makes any sense. From a science fiction perspective, the most interesting element, I think, is psychological rather than technical. See, human perception, which I love, is selective. We see what we expect to see. If a person who once dominated headlines, who was in our lives everywhere, were encountered years later in an ordinary setting, most observers would filter the resemblance through the assumption that such a meeting is impossible, or that somebody's a dead ringer. He's a dead ringer, he's a doppelganger. Wow, everybody's got a double. Look at this guy. The brain resolves the tension by dismissing the similarity as coincidence. Not only that, if you dared to post this online, you would be called crazy. You're crazy again. History offers milder versions of this phenomenon. For example, rumors about famous figures surviving their reported deaths have circulated for centuries. This is nothing new. These stories persist not because they're proven, but because sometimes they tap into a deep fascination with hidden continuity. They reflect and indicate on our part a suspicion that official endings are too neat for a messy world. They were wondering the same thing. Think about it. About Hitler. Was he alive? Did he make it? Would there not have been an incentive to get him out, to spirit him away, to put him somewhere else? Wouldn't you? At the end of World War II? And if you think it's easy to hide people now, it's even easier then. Hell, John Dillinger even fooled him with that terrible... Remember, he dipped his fingertips in acid and... This is nothing new, my friends. In the future, and that future is now, with advanced identity engineering, that suspicion could acquire, dare I say, a more tangible and realistic foundation. And the ethical implications, oh my God. Remember ethics? Remember anybody? Raise your hand. The ethical implications of such capabilities would be enormous. The power to erase and recreate identity challenges legal systems that we think will be built on stable, consistent personhood. It raises questions about, for example, accountability, consent, and the ownership of one's own narrative. Can you do this? If a government or a private consortium could convincingly reassign a person's existence, not their identity, but their existence, the distinction between protection and control would blur completely. Oh my God. Do you see where this is going? Yet even in this speculative future, the greatest safeguard, the greatest against detection, might remain ordinary disbelief. Societies and groups and all of us function on shared agreements about what is possible, what is plausible, what's real. When a claim falls outside those agreements, when it's considered a conspiracy theory, when it's considered nuts, it's marginalized by default. You don't want to get too Alex Jones on us. You're starting to sound like Candace Owens there with her forward light blinking imaging or whatever you call it. See, this is not necessarily the result of any kind of censorship, contrived or legitimate or otherwise. It's often the byproduct of a cognitive economy. People can't investigate every extraordinary possibility. They rely on trusted frameworks and systems to conserve attention. And the phrase, It is easier than you think captures the unsettling simplicity and ease of this idea. Not because the transformation of identity would be trivial, but because the social mechanisms that would normally shield us or shield such a transformation are already present. They're already here. Trust in official narratives, fatigue and ennui with conspiracy, and the desire for closure all contribute hand in hand to a landscape where certain questions fade quickly. My friends, science fiction has long explored worlds in which death is negotiable and identity is fluid. See, these stories resonate because they exaggerate tendencies that already exist. And by the way, not to confuse it, but sometimes our religious and spiritual beliefs kind of blend into rather obscure and obfuscate the reality of what is and what isn't. And as technology advances, the boundary between fiction and feasibility narrows considerably. And the challenge for any future society would be maintaining transparency and ethical restraint in the face of tools that make reinvention possible. Now, this thought experiment that we're talking about is ultimately about humility. Our confidence in the permanence and the stability of public narratives really may be less secure than we even assume. And whether or not such scenarios even materialize or ever materialize, the exercise of imagining them sharpens our awareness of how perception, technology, and power interact. It reminds us that reality is mediated through systems that can evolve in, shall we say, unexpected ways. In the end, the enduring question is not whether a specific individual could secretly live on under another name. It's how societies choose to balance skepticism with trust. See, too little skepticism invites manipulation. Too much erodes the shared group that makes cooperation possible. You have to know when to hold them, when to fold them. And the future will likely demand a more nuanced, balanced, kind of an equilibrium, as identity itself, which we thought was static and constant, becomes increasingly protean, malleable, changeable. This message is very, very simple. The world we are building contains today tools that can reshape appearances and stories with unprecedented precision. The possibility of human hidden continuities is not a prophecy, but a prompt or an indicator to think critically. Critical thinking, folks, about the structures that define truth, what we think are truth, what we think is apparent, what we think is obvious. In a landscape where it might indeed be easier than we think to reinvent a life or continue a life in a different form, shape-shifting, transmogrification, whatever you want to call it, the responsibility to safeguard authenticity becomes one of the central challenges of our time. So we will see. So let me tell you right now, what do you think? Do you think it's possible? Do you think it is possible? Could Charlie Kirk, as we speak right now, be someplace? Now let me tell you what also people think about. This is probably the greatest reason why people do not believe that this is something this is how people do not believe that this is something they can deal with. They always think, more than anything else, that there's something that is immutable about reality. They don't like the idea that something like this could really be changed. They also have this crazy idea that people can't keep their mouth shut. If Charlie were to be dead, that means that the ambulance driver, the person with the hospital, and his TPUSA, the people who were there, the people who put him in the car, that everybody has to be in on it. That's what people think. In that famous CIA document, that memorandum that talked about weaponizing the term conspiracy theory, one of the things they said was, people don't understand compartmentalization. They don't understand that, for example, in the case of the Manhattan Project, there were over 100,000 people involved in it, and nobody knew anything about it. They were all back to back. They didn't know what the hell it was. One of the greatest examples of this was the development of the iPhone for Apple. Google is open. They talk about what they do. In Apple, the people who did work the glass, they were over here. The people who did the box, they were over here. The ones who did the software were over here. The ones who conducted the case were over here. The people who wanted to see the development and the release of the iPhone more than anybody else were the employees. They never knew. They worked for the same place. They used to get checked and searched whenever they were making these things. They had no idea. And they're there every single day. Not only that, people keep secrets better than you could ever imagine. And not only that, there are some secrets that nobody will believe if you're ever revealed. That's the beautiful part about this. Go ahead. Tell somebody that John Kennedy Jr., remember that they said a while back, they said he was like, tell somebody that you saw him. They'll say you're crazy. The same reason most people don't report UFOs. So the bottom line is, whether it's Hitler, or whether it's, there's no connection here, but whether it's Hitler, whether it's John Kennedy Jr., whether it's Epstein, whether it's Charlie, whether it's Bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, name it. If you think it is impossible to do this, then the shadow government and the dark forces have succeeded. If you think that, if your incredulity eliminates the mere possibility of this, then they've succeeded. Okay? Then they've succeeded. All right, dear friends, thank you so much. What do you think? Give me your thoughts and comments. Is it possible? Is it remotely possible? Or is this just crazy talk? I don't think it's impossible at all. I don't think it's impossible at all. I've got some questions for you, my dear friends, in the comment section, which I'd like you to review. Please like the video. That's critical for us. Please hit that little bell so you're notified of live streams and new videos. And whatever you do, and of course, subscribe. But whatever you do, think about this and comment as you see fit.